Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the most important chess tournament there is, the World Championship Candidates, where 8 players are competing against each other, trying to challenge Magnus Carlsen at the next World Championship match. And today we are going to take a look at the game played between Hikaru Nakamura and Timur Radjabov. So let's jump straight into the game. And by the way, I'm showing you times at the bottom and at the top of the screen, so you can always keep track of how much time the players have left on the clock, as time becomes very important. They get 2 hours to start, and after that, they get 1 hour bonus time at move 40, and at move 60, you're gonna get another 15 minutes plus a 30-second increment per move to finish the game. So let's jump into the opening. We have e4, e5, and now knight to f3, knight to c6, and Hikaru goes for Ruy Lopez opening, pinning, or already preparing to pin the knight, and now Timur Radjabov goes for the Berlin defense, so playing knight to f6, and there are a few responses here by white. Of course, castling is the most played move, but also d3 is the anti-Berlin, which is very popular at the moment. And also Hikaru is going for this move, and now we have bishop to c5 by Radjabov, and here there are 2 main moves. It is either pawn to c3, preparing to push d4 at some point, or it's a bishop takes on c6. But Hikaru goes for a less played move, but still, of course, a very good one, which is knight b to d2, basically developing the knight to the center, and at some point you're probably gonna jump over to here, attacking the bishop, depending on the game plan. And of course, if you wonder if you cannot just simply win a pawn here by capturing, well, you're simply gonna lose the game after something like queen to d4. So of course we don't have that. We have instead knight b to d2, and now we have knight to d4, attacking white's knight, and we have an exchange here in the center of the board. And now Hikaru plays c3. He is now going for the c3 option, kicking out the bishop, as it now comes with a tempo. And after the bishop moves back, he plays d4, striking in the center. And well, instead of taking here in the center of the board, you would give white the chances to create a very good center. But, well, there's a very complicated line with pawn to e5, and after he pawn captures here, an in-between move, we could have something like pawn takes on c3, and now something like queen to e7. But this is known to be quite nice for white, so we don't have this on the board. Instead of all of that, after d4, we have c6, basically kicking out the bishop, and Hikaru goes full danger levels. He captures the pawn on e5, counter-attacking black's knight, and we have captures on f6 with the queen. Of course, now there is a threat of checkmate on f2, and Hikaru simply castles out of the way, protecting the pawn on f2. So now we also have castles by black, and now this position was still seen a few times. It has been seen 9 times. But Hikaru goes for a new move, which is queen to h5, putting pressure on this pawn, attacking the pawn, and also just putting the queen on a very active square. And here we have queen to c6, basically sliding the queen over, preparing to maybe bring the queen here, or also to make this push happen at some point. So now we have rook to e1 by Hikaru and rook to e8 by Radjabov. Hikaru goes for knight to f3. He is moving the knight to a more active square, controlling some central squares, and also making sure that his bishop is able to develop at some point. And now we have d5 by black, striking in the center, and well, there is just no good way of holding on to this pawn. So we have e captures on d5, and now rook captures rook on e1 with a check. Of course, you need to recapture, and after that, we have now queen to c4. And this comes with quite a nice idea, which is bringing the bishop to g4. So Hikaru, of course, notices that and plays h3, preventing this idea. And now we have bishop to d7. Of course, you cannot go as far as you would want to. And now we have queen back to f3, adding a support, or well, of course, keeping the support on the d5 pawn, and also just putting the queen on a more central square. So now we have rook to e8, attacking the knight, and now we have blocking with the bishop and also developing at the same time with bishop to e3. So we have captures, and now rook to e5, attacking this pawn twice now. So, well, you either need to protect this pawn once more, or, well, you have to find some other solution, because at the moment we have 7 pawns for Hikaru and 6 pawns for black. Well, you of course can give this pawn back, but if you try successfully to hold on to this pawn, you're probably gonna have a winning endgame, or at least an endgame with a lot of winning chances. And also the engine recommends here rook to d1. After that, we could have something like rook to e5 counter, I don't know, attacking white's queen. And in this position, the best move for white actually would not be to move the queen, but to play rook to d4, now counter-attacking black's queen on c4, and after captures, and now rook captures on e3, attacking the knight and threatening also a check there. You simply ignore this and play rook to c7, counter-attacking once again the bishop on d7, and after captures, attack of the rook and rook to b1. Well, you're gonna capture the bishop on d7, and now check, and you just simply gonna end up in a position like this, where white is actually pawn down, but it's plus 1.7 for white, if you believe it or not. Well, the engines are crazy, but of course this did not happen. Hikaru didn't go for rook to d1 on this move. He went pawn to d6, basically saying, well, if you want to win this pawn, go get me there. I'm not gonna engage in all of this. So we have d6 on the board, and now we have queen to d5, and there's not gonna be a way anyway where you we be able to hold on to this pawn. So we have now rook to d1 on this move, now attacking the queen, but so we have simply takes, and now takes on e3. So the pawn is given back by Hikaru, but he has a very active position still, and he has a knight versus the light square bishop of black, which is at the moment stuck, basically defending against the pawn on d6, which is still alive, but it's probably gonna be taken at some point because it's very weak and not easy to protect. But also black's pawn here on the queen side are quite weak, and Hikaru plays rook to d5, already attacking some pressure and preparing to bring the rook to c5. So we have now f6 by black, basically preparing to bring the king towards the center of the board. In endgames, you of course want to activate your king as well, and now we have c5 by Hikaru. Now rook to e6, attacking the pawn, and as white, you of course don't want to go back again to d5 and trying to hold on to this pawn desperately. You very much want to create some counterplay yourself, want to attack yourself, and you play rook to c7, the best move, attacking the pawn on b7, and we have captures. So again, you're attacking now once again the a7 pawn, and black pushes the pawn out of the way. So again, now we have a very much material equality, but of course it's a 3 versus 2 here on the queen side, and it's a 3 versus 2 for black on the king side. So there's an imbalance a little bit of the pawn structure. Well, black has the pawn here more, and white has the pawn here more. And well, now it's time basically to centralize the knight to d4, and now we have h5 by black. You want to play where you're stronger, and black is doing exactly that, expanding here and preparing to bring your pawns and your king forward. So we have now h4. Hikaru doesn't want to allow any more expansion on this side of the board, and now we have g5 by black. Radjabov, well, of course, supported by the pawn on f6. He can play the move g5. This was also one of the purpose by the move f6 very much earlier. So of course moves always have different purposes. So after all of that, we have now g3, adding support to the h4 pawn, and now we have well, it's really time to activate the kings. So we have king to g6, king to e3, and now rook to d5. And here Radjabov is getting very, very low on time already. He has 5 minutes 46 seconds, as you can see here, and Hikaru has still 19 minutes on the clock. So well, Hikaru is probably gonna try to play some fast moves to really put Radjabov under pressure. It's now move 32, and Hikaru plays move 33, rook to a7. So there are still 7 more moves to go for Radjabov to be able to get his extra hour. So he needs to start playing faster, and he plays rook to d6, and he only has now 3 minutes and 17 seconds left on the clock. And Hikaru goes for now a simple improving move, which is b3, and now we have bishop to e6. He has only 3 minutes 12 seconds on the clock, whereas Hikaru still has 12 minutes and 36 seconds, so he plays rook to c7, and now we have now we have an interesting decision for Radjabov, and he decides to go for rook to d5, which is actually not a very accurate move, because it gives white the possibility to play rook to c6 now, immediately taking advantage of the freely accessible square c6, and now this pawn here will be probably lost. So we have now check by black, and now after king to f2, we have bishop back to d7, attacking the rook, but the pawn on e6 is lost. So Hikaru is now up a pawn, and Radjabov is very, very low on time. He has 54 seconds left, and he still has a few more moves to make. He is now on move 38. So we have now captures, and now we have rook to e4. So he's basically putting pressure on the h4 pawn, and Hikaru ignores this for the time being. He plays rook to d6, counterattacking the bishop on d7, and of course there is one last move Radjabov needs to play. He has 15 seconds on the clock before he gets his extra hour, and he plays bishop back to c8. Basically, going or trying to go to a kind of solid square, but he was very much in time pressure, and you can see he only had 2 seconds left on the clock when he played this move, so he really didn't have a lot of time to think. And Hikaru is now in this position very much better. He is plus 1.6 according to my engine, and Hikaru now plays rook to d8, immediately attacking black's bishop on the light square. So we have now bishop to g4, and now there are a lot of very small improving moves made by both players, trying to create some weaknesses in their opponent's territory. And also the time situation is now getting lower for Hikaru. He spent a lot of time now playing the last few moves, but of course there is still a lot of time left. So we have now rook to e6, and now we have rook a7. Now rook to e4, so a lot of shuffling of the pieces, and now rook to a8, attacking or at least pressuring the bishop on e8. So we have now king to f7, adding further support to the bishop on e8, and now we have rook over to d8. This is really a square the engine wants Hikaru's rook to be, because it's controlling the open file, and it's also very active, and you can bring it to d4 or d5 to pressure a lot of pawns here. So it's a very good square for the rook to be on for the time being. So we have now rook back to e7, and Hikaru is still very much better. His pawn up, and he is now again up on time. So it's going to be very hard for Radjabov to defend this position. Let's see if he can do it. So we have now rook down to d2, and now we have rook to e4. So now once again rook to d5. So a lot of shuffling. But now here this pawn is very much under pressure, and Radjabov brings the king to protect it, and now we have a3 by Hikaru. 3 pawns next to each other on the third rank, and well, some point he's probably gonna create a pass pawn on this side of the board, and let's see if we can convert this 3-on-1 on the queen side to a win. So we have now rook to e7 and now knight to d4, centralizing the knight and also putting pressure very much on this b4 pawn. And really, if this pawn falls here, there's gonna be 3 passed pawns, or at least 2 if you trade one of the pawns, and it's not gonna be easy for black to draw this game. So we have now rook down to e4, and now attacking the pawn on h4, of course. And now we have knight takes on b5. So Hikaru is now grabbing this pawn and also giving up the pawn on h4. So now both players have 2 pass pawns. Black has 2 pass pawns, and white, of course, has 3 pass pawns. And also at this time, once again, Hikaru is very, very much up on the time. He has 30 minutes, whereas Radjabov only has 12 minutes on the clock left, and it's move 33. And Hikaru plays move 34 with knight back to d4. Once again, centralizing the knight and also cutting off the rook's vision onto the queen side pawns. And it's going to be hard for black to stop these pawns. But at the same time, it's not so easy to win this game. Also because black has 2 pass pawns of their own. And the engine is saying it's plus 0.9. So let's see what's happening. We have now rook h2 check and now king to g3. Counter-attacking rook, and now rook to d2, basically pinning the knight here, and not making it very easy for Hikaru to move. So we have now c4. Of course, now you protect your own rook and allow your knight to jump away if you want to. And now we have rook to d3 check. Of course, this pawn here is, well, protected. And of course, Hikaru's move also was basically moving this pawn out of the way, because, if you play something like this, rook to d3 check is gonna be very nice for black. So instead of that, we have c4, and now rook to d3 check and king to h4. He's now moving to the corner, blockading this pawn, and also not allowing, of course, black's king to get closer to him. And also here, it's very much for either side to make. It's very hard for either side to make any progress. And we have now bishop to f7 attacking the rook. And of course, you need to keep protecting your knight here. So we have rook to d8, and we are now on move. We are now on move move 85, and he plays rook to d1. And this is actually the current position we are in. I'm recording this game as it is going on. So we have 20 minutes for Hikaru left, and I'm gonna continue recording this recap once the game ends. And it really looks like at this point as if Hikaru will be able to win, but let's see what's gonna happen. So I don't know the result myself, so let's keep watching, and I hope to see you at the end of this recap. So let's keep watching.